On August 13, 2026, Jeremy Tremaine Williams was executed in Alabama a little over 2 years after he was sent to death row. But the reason he ended up on that gurney comes down to a number: $1,300. That's what he agreed to pay for 1 hour with a 5-year-old girl. And the person he paid was her own mother. Her name was Kamarie Holland, and this is what happened to her. In December of 2021, Jeremy Williams was 37 years old, living between Columbus, Georgia, and Phenix City, Alabama, right on the state line. He had met a woman named Christy Sipple online, and the two of them had been seeing each other for a while. Christy had 2 kids, and one of them was 5-year-old Kamarie. And here's the thing about Kamarie being in that house at all. She wasn't even supposed to be there. Her father had sole custody. He would let Christy watch her, because that's what you do, you trust the mother. That was the whole arrangement. That was the trust. And Christy sold it. In the days before Kamarie died, Christy and Jeremy started talking numbers. Not about a babysitter, not about a weekend visit. They were setting a price for Jeremy to be alone with her little girl. Christy started at $2,500, but he thought that was too high. So they went back and forth, a mother and a man haggling over a little girl, until they landed on $1,300. Sit with that for a second. She talked him down. She negotiated a discount on her own child. And if you want to know exactly what kind of people we are dealing with here, hold on to this. He never even paid it. He talked her down to $1,300 for her daughter, and then he stiffed her on the bill. It was still dark on the morning of December 13th when he came for her. He took Kamarie out of the house and drove her first to his own place in Columbus. But Jeremy's wife was home. She took one look at him standing there with a little girl and told him he couldn't be there. So he left, and he drove Kamarie across the state line to a vacant duplex he used to own in Phenix City, a house standing empty where nobody would hear anything. For the next 2 hours, he did things to her that a grown man does not come back from. He forced meth into her. He raped her. And the whole time, he kept his phone out, recording it. And then he strangled her. Here's the detail the investigators could never shake, because Jeremy told them himself, later sitting across from a detective, saying it out loud. It didn't happen fast. At one point, he thought it was already over. And then, he said, she gasped for air, so he tightened his grip and kept going until there was no breath left to take. And even with her gone, he still didn't stop. He kept the camera running. What he did in that basement after she died is a thing most people cannot make themselves picture, and I'm not going to make you. But it has a name, and the state would put that name on the charge sheet, of a corpse. Then he covered her with a tarp, left her where she lay, and walked out. That same morning, while Kamarie was lying in that basement, Christy Sipple called the police to report her missing. She had the story worked out. She said she had put Kamarie to bed around midnight and woke up to find her gone and the front door standing open. A stranger, she wanted them to think. Somebody slipped in during the night and took her little girl. And the whole community believed her. They came out for Kamarie. Volunteers, officers, search parties, fanning out across 2 towns looking for a 5-year-old who was already dead, already cold, put there by the man her mother had handed her to. Christy leaned all the way into it. She sat down in front of a television camera, let the tears come, and told the world Kamarie was the essence of her life, that she just couldn't understand what had happened.
I'm a mommy, and I did not have nothing to do with this. She was my life. I lived for her daily.
And she said all of it, knowing exactly where her daughter was, knowing exactly who she had sold her to, and for how much. But the detectives kept circling one name. Jeremy had been one of the last people seen anywhere near the child, and the more they pulled on his background, the worse it got. Because just days before, a grown woman had come forward and accused Jeremy of sexually assaulting her, and told police he had made a disturbing admission about a 5-year-old during the attack. That was the thread that gave them a warrant. When they searched his property, they went out to a shed in the backyard and what they found in there told a story all its own. A child-sized chair and a sandwich with one small bite taken out of it. Around the same time, officers tracked Jeremy down at a motel in Phenix City and took him into custody, but he wouldn't tell them where Kamarie was. And then Jeremy's own wife came home. When it clicked for her what these officers were actually looking for, she gave them an address, the old duplex in Phenix City. And she told them flat out, if he did something to that girl, that's where she'll be. They went, and in the basement under a tarp, they found Kamarie. One of the investigators who stood in that basement didn't dress it up afterward. He just said what he saw, a small child brutally assaulted and killed. These are men who have seen the worst things a county can produce, and this is the one they take home with them. It should have ended there, with the arrest, but 2 weeks later, it got darker. On Christmas night, Jeremy sent word that he wanted to talk. He told the jail lieutenant he had been praying, that he wanted to get right with God before he was executed. And then he opened up, and he couldn't seem to stop. In one sitting, he admitted to killing Kamarie, but he kept going. On his own, without being asked, he confessed to abusing his own baby daughter years earlier, back when the family was living in Alaska and then in Texas. He admitted there were other children he had hurt, children he said he couldn't even fully remember. And when the lieutenant mentioned a body found under a tarp in a basement, Jeremy didn't flinch. He just confirmed it was him. And none of that darkness was new. Jeremy had been charged with child abuse once before, all the way back in 2009. A jury acquitted him in 2012, and he walked out a free man. And 9 years after walking out of that courtroom, he was standing in a basement in Phenix City with Kamarie Holland. So investigators pulled an old file back open. In 2005, Jeremy's 1-month-old daughter, Nadia, had died up in North Pole, Alaska. There were blunt force injuries on that baby, but at the time nobody could prove what happened, and it went into the books as undetermined, partly because Jeremy refused the polygraph and refused to say a word. But after what happened to Kamarie, they weren't willing to let it lie. They charged him with second-degree murder in his own infant daughter's death. The way the district attorney came to see it, this had been going on for around 20 years. In his words, starting, at least as far as they knew, back in Alaska, where he killed his baby and started all of this with another young child. His trial came in April 2024, and there was something almost surreal about it. Jeremy had already pleaded guilty. He had told the judge he only wanted to, quote, expedite the process. But Alabama law won't let a man plead his way straight onto death row in a capital case. Guilty or not, the state had to put it in front of a jury. And he didn't want anyone fighting for him. When his own attorney asked whether he wanted them to argue anything at all on his behalf, Jeremy answered, quote, I don't want them to say nothing. So for 3 days, 15 strangers had to sit in that box and take it in. And the hardest part was the video footage Jeremy had shot himself on his own phone. 11 women and 4 men had to sit there while it played. Prosecutors described what was on it as a sexual rage and said that during it, Jeremy was screaming at that little girl to die. Jurors broke down in the box. Court staff, who couldn't even see the screen, who could only hear the audio coming through, sat there shaken. Grown officers of the law in that room were fighting not to cry. And then, on April 12th, they convicted him on 4 counts of capital murder, and on top of that, abuse of a child, producing that material, human trafficking, conspiracy, and abuse of a corpse. And 3 days later, the judge sentenced him to death on all 4 capital counts. But before that sentence came down, the people who loved Kamarie got to stand up and speak. Her father rose first. He looked straight at the man who did this and told him, "You don't deserve life yourself." He said his daughter had been too precious for what was done to her. He said Jeremy's life didn't compare to a single thing about Kamarie's. Her 13-year-old sister couldn't be there in her own voice, so her words were read out. "I don't understand why someone would hurt her," she'd written. "She was so sweet and caring." Her grandmother's letter went further, read aloud into that silent courtroom, asking him straight What kind of demonic creature are you? And then she named the quiet arithmetic of what he had taken, that Kamarie would never have a prom, never a graduation, never a wedding. Jeremy's own ex-wife also took the stand and called him soulless. And a young woman, grown now, who Jeremy had molested when she was 4 years old, stood up in that courtroom and called him the only word that fit: a monster. The sheriff, Heath Taylor, had worked a lot of cases, and afterward he said this was one of the hardest his office had ever touched. In society, he said, Jeremy was another kind of evil, the kind we just don't need walking around. And then there was still the matter of the woman who sold her. Because Christy Sipple was facing capital murder too, and she could have gone to death row right alongside him. But in March 2024, prosecutors cut her a deal. They dropped the murder charge. She pleaded guilty to trafficking, and she got 20 years. Which means one day, Christy walks back out. She gets to grow old. She gets the prom and the graduation and the wedding. All the things Kamarie never will. And here is where this case turns into something you almost never see. On death row in Alabama, the appeals crawl on for decades. The longest-serving man in the state was sentenced back in 1982, and he's still there. Jeremy could have stretched this out 20 years the same way, and almost every man in his position does exactly that. But he did the opposite. In 2025, he fired his lawyers and asked the court to let him die. He wanted every appeal waived and the sentence carried out as fast as the state could manage. It took a judge about 10 minutes of careful questions to satisfy himself that Jeremy understood what he was giving up, and that he was competent to give it up. Don't mistake any of that for remorse. The district attorney certainly didn't. He called Jeremy truly evil and said the man showed no remorse for a single thing he had done. The sheriff put it plainer still. Jeremy just didn't want to spend 20 years sitting in a cell, waiting. Even so, Alabama wasn't allowed to just take his word for it. State law requires one automatic review of every death sentence, whether the condemned man wants it or not. So in March 2026, the appeals court looked at all of it anyway and upheld every piece. From there, it went to the Alabama Supreme Court, which cleared the way for the death warrant in June. And Governor Kay Ivey signed the order and set the date for August 13th, saying plainly she had no plans to grant him mercy. And I keep coming back to what the district attorney said as that date drew close. Words that say just about everything. Kamarie didn't get 30 minutes, he said. She didn't get 40 years. And on August 13th, the state made sure Jeremy got neither. His final day had come. That day, he wasn't alone. His mother came to visit, and so did his father, his stepmother, and his brother. The night before, he picked up a phone and talked to his grandmother and his aunt, the kind of call a man makes when he knows there won't be another one. And his wife came too. The same wife who, 5 years earlier, had looked at him standing in their home with a little girl and told him he couldn't be there. The same wife who, when the police came searching, handed them the address of the duplex and told them that's where the child would be. She was the reason they found Kamarie, and on his last day, she was there to say goodbye to him. And he was fed. In his last days, the state kept bringing the trays, and Jeremy ate. Grits, gravy, jelly, cake, and apple juice in the morning, a hamburger, fries, oatmeal cookies, bread and corn by noon, beef and rice, and a brownie at night. And in between, whatever he could pull from the vending machines, snack after snack, one soda after another. A man running out of days, filling them with food. On his final day, he ate a Philly cheesesteak sandwich, cheddar cheese chips, M&Ms, washed down with Dr. Pepper. For lunch, he had a turkey sandwich, baked beans, salad, coleslaw, and a slice of strawberry cake. And when they asked him what he wanted for his final meal, the last thing he would ever choose to eat, Jeremy asked for cheese pizza. Think about that for a second. Because there was another meal, nearly 5 years earlier, that never got finished. A peanut butter sandwich in a backyard shed with a single small bite taken out of it. That was Kamarie's. One bite, and then he took her. Jeremy got nearly 5 more years, a last visit with his loved ones, and a pizza on his way out. Kamarie got 1 bite. That night, he was led to the execution chamber. At 5:53 p.m., the curtains to the witness room slid open. On the other side of the glass sat 8 people. Most of them were reporters, there to write down whatever happened next. Jeremy was already on the gurney when the curtains parted, and he turned his head toward the glass, toward the people who had come to watch him die. An official stepped forward and read the death warrant aloud, the state's paperwork explaining why this man was about to stop breathing. And then came the question they ask every condemned man in his final moment. Did he have any last words? He did. And of all the things a man could say, at the very end, after everything he had done to a 5-year-old girl who trusted the adults around her, this is what Jeremy Williams chose. I thank God for forgiving me for my sins so I can meet him at peace. Good night. He asked for peace, and then the microphone clicked off and the drugs began to flow. What happened next is the part the witnesses will not forget, because Jeremy did not go out afraid. He turned his head slowly left to right, and he smiled. His lips were moving like he was praying or maybe singing something only he could hear. He yawned the way you do when you're drifting off at the end of a long day. And then, softly, he went still. An officer moved to the gurney and leaned over him. He called out loud enough for the room to hear. "Mr. Williams." Jeremy's fist clenched. At 6:04, the officer called his name again. "Mr. Williams." This time, nothing came back. No movement, no sound. A few moments later, the final drug went in. At 6:10 p.m., the curtain was drawn shut, closing the witnesses off from what was left. And at 6:16 in the evening, he was pronounced dead. Jeremy Williams was 42 years old. And Jeremy Williams wasn't the only man America put to death on August 13th. He was one of 3. 3 men, 3 different states, all executed in a single day. And that hadn't happened in 16 years, not since 2010. Both cases are on the channel right now. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one.